After the shocking event that happened during the traditional marriage ceremony, the entire village of Eziobodo remained restless for many days. People could not stop talking about what they had witnessed. In markets, at the stream, and under the large udala tree where elders gathered, villagers whispered about the strange situation. "Have you ever seen such a thing before?" one woman asked. "No," another replied. "A groom rejecting a bride during the ceremony like that is unheard of." Many people also spoke about Adise and her family with sympathy. "That poor girl did nothing wrong," an elderly woman said. "She has always been respectful and hard-working," another added. But while the village talked about the shocking event, the situation quickly moved forward in another direction. Because Obina had publicly declared that he wanted to marry Amarachi instead, and because he had already agreed to all the demands placed before him, the elders decided that the marriage between Obina and Amarachi could proceed. Within a short time, preparations were made for the new union. Everything happened quickly. There was no long celebration like the one that had been planned for Adise, but the necessary traditional steps were completed. Soon, Obina officially became Amarachi's husband. To many people in the village, the situation still felt strange. Some villagers whispered quietly among themselves. "This marriage started with confusion." "Yes," another person said, "something about it does not feel right." But the elders had already allowed the marriage to happen, and life in the village continued. However, what no one realized was that the marriage had been built on lies and dark manipulation. Inside their household, Amarachi and her mother quickly began showing their true intentions. At first, Amarachi behaved kindly toward Obina. She smiled sweetly and acted like a loving wife. But slowly, her behavior began to change. She had married a wealthy merchant and she expected to live a life of comfort and luxury. Meanwhile, Lolonjideka was even more demanding. From the moment Obina became part of their household, she began making requests. "Obina," she would say, "we need money to repair the roof of the house." Another day she would say, "The family needs new wrappers for the coming festival." Sometimes she demanded money for things that were not even necessary. Because Obina was still under the influence of the charm placed on him, he never questioned their demands. Whenever they asked for money, he gave it without hesitation. Whenever they instructed him to do something, he obeyed quietly. It was as if his mind no longer belonged to him. The confident and successful merchant who had once traveled from village to village making strong business decisions had suddenly changed into a man who behaved like a servant inside his own home. Every morning, Obina woke up early and began doing chores around the compound. He swept the yard, he carried water from the stream, he chopped firewood for cooking. Sometimes he even helped prepare meals in the kitchen. Neighbors who passed by the compound often stared in surprise. "Is that not the wealthy merchant who came to marry Amarachi?" someone whispered. "Yes," another replied. "But look at him. He works like a house servant." People found it difficult to understand the situation. A successful trader like Obina normally would not spend his time doing household chores all day. But Obina never complained. If Amarachi told him to wash clothes, he washed them. If Lolonjideka ordered him to fetch water, he obeyed immediately. He behaved like a man who had lost his own will. Meanwhile, he still continued his trading business. He traveled occasionally to buy palm produce and other goods, just as he had done before. But there was a major difference now. Every time he returned from his trading journeys with money, Amarachi and her mother quickly demanded most of it. "Give me the money," Amarachi would say. "We need many things for the house." Sometimes Lolonjideka would add her own demands. "You must also buy new furniture for the compound. Bring more drinks for our visitors." Obina never refused. No matter how much money they asked for, he gave it to them. Slowly, this began to affect his business. In the past, Obina had always reinvested his profits into buying more goods for trade. That was how his business had grown and become successful. But now, most of his money disappeared into the constant demands from his wife and mother-in-law. There was little money left to support his trading activities. Soon, problems began appearing in his business. Some of his trading partners complained that he was no longer bringing enough goods. Others began to choose to work with different merchants. Debt started building slowly. But Obina seemed unaware of the seriousness of the situation. The charm placed on him had clouded his judgment. While his business slowly weakened, another problem was also growing far away in his hometown. Obina had a mother and younger siblings who depended on him. Before his strange marriage in Eziobudo, Obina always supported his family. He sent money regularly, he visited them often. He made sure his younger siblings had food, clothes, and school supplies. But after marrying Amarachi, everything changed. Months passed without him sending any help. He also stopped visiting his hometown. At first, his mother believed he was simply busy with his business. But as more time passed, she began to feel worried. "My son has never behaved like this before." She sat outside her house with a neighbor, looking troubled. Obina always remembers his family. The neighbor nodded. "Yes, everyone knows he is a responsible son." But now, his mother continued, "He has stopped sending money, and he has not visited us for months." Her voice was filled with concern. Something is not right. Back in Eziobudo, Obina continued living under the control of Amarachi and her mother. His once successful life was slowly falling apart. The proud merchant who had once walked confidently through many villages had become a man who could no longer control his own decisions. Every command given by Amarachi or Lolonjideka was followed without question. Every demand for money was answered without resistance. And slowly, the marriage that had been built on lies and manipulation began to destroy everything Obina had worked hard to build. Years slowly passed after the strange marriage that shocked the village of Eziobudo. Time moved forward, seasons changed, and life in the village continued as usual. Farmers planted crops during the rainy season and harvested them during the dry months. Children grew older and new babies were born. But inside the house where Obina now lived with Amarachi and her mother, life was far from peaceful. The once successful merchant had slowly become something very different from the man he used to be. Before his marriage, Obina had been known as a hard-working and confident trader. People respected him in many villages because he was wise in business and treated others with fairness. But after marrying Amarachi, everything about him had changed. Instead of living like a respected husband and trader, Obina now lived like a servant inside his own home. Every morning he woke up before sunrise, not to plan his business journeys, but to begin working around the house. He swept the compound carefully, he carried water from the stream in heavy clay pots, he chopped firewood for cooking, he cleaned the kitchen area, and even washed clothes when Amarachi ordered him to do so. If Amarachi asked him to prepare food, he obeyed without hesitation. If Lolonjideka demanded that he go to the market to buy things for her, he went immediately. Neighbors often passed by the compound and saw him doing these tasks. At first, many people believed he was simply being a supportive husband. But as the years passed, the situation began to look strange. "Something is not normal about that man," some villagers whispered. "A wealthy merchant should not behave like this," another person said. But Obina himself seemed unaware of the strange change in his life. The charm that had been placed on him years earlier still controlled his mind. It had slowly turned him into a man who could no longer think clearly for himself. Meanwhile, far away in his hometown, someone else was becoming deeply worried: Obina's mother. Mama Obina was an elderly woman who loved her son dearly. She had raised him with care after the death of his father and had always been proud of the man he had become. Before his marriage in Eziobudo, Obina had always taken good care of his family. He sent money home regularly to support his mother and younger siblings. He visited them often, bringing gifts and food. He always showed respect and kindness toward his mother. But after his strange marriage, everything had changed. At first, Mama Obina believed her son was simply busy with work and married life. But as months passed without hearing from him, her heart began to feel uneasy. She waited patiently, expecting him to visit soon. But the visits never came. Even the money he used to send regularly stopped arriving. One evening, she sat outside her small house watching the sun slowly disappear behind the trees. Her neighbor, an elderly woman who lived nearby, came to sit beside her. "You look worried," the neighbor said. Mama Obina sighed deeply. "I am worried about my son." "What happened?" the neighbor asked. Mama Obina shook her head slowly. "For many months now, I have not heard from Obina." The neighbor looked surprised. "That is strange," she said. "Yes," Mama Obina replied sadly. "My son has always cared for this family." She looked down at her hands. "But now, he does not visit. He does not send money. It is as if he has forgotten us." The neighbor tried to comfort her. "Maybe he is busy with business." Mama Obina nodded slowly, but her worry remained in her eyes. "I will visit him soon," she said quietly. And a few days later, she decided to travel to Eziobodo to see her son. The journey took many hours, but Mama Obina did not complain. She only wanted to see her son and understand why he had suddenly changed. When she finally arrived in Eziobodo, she asked villagers for directions to the compound where her son lived. People showed her the way. But as she walked through the compound entrance, the first thing she saw shocked her. Her son was sweeping the yard. The wealthy merchant she had raised with pride was holding a broom and cleaning the compound like a house servant. Mama Obina stood still in surprise. "Obina," she called. Obina looked up. For a moment, his face showed little emotion. He walked slowly toward her. "Mother," he said quietly. Mama Obina hugged him with relief. "My son, I have missed you," she said. But something felt strange. The warmth she expected from her son was not there. His voice sounded distant. His eyes looked empty. She pulled back and looked carefully at his face. "My son, why have you not visited home?" she asked. Obina shrugged slightly. "I have been busy." His answer felt cold. Before Mama Obina could ask another question, Amarachi appeared from inside the house. She looked at the elderly woman with little excitement. "Oh, you came," Amarachi said casually. Mama Obina greeted her politely. "My daughter, I came to see my son." Amarachi nodded but did not show much warmth. "Sit down," she said. Mama Obina sat down quietly. But as the hours passed, she began noticing strange things. Her son behaved like someone who was afraid to speak freely. Whenever Amarachi or Lolonjideka gave him instructions, he obeyed immediately. He did not argue, he did not question anything. Even when Mama Obina tried to talk to him privately, he seemed distracted and distant. Later that evening, Mama Obina saw something that made her heart even heavier. Amarachi ordered Obina to go to the market to buy several items. Without hesitation, he left immediately. Mama Obina watched silently. Her son had never behaved this way before. When Obina finally returned from the market carrying heavy loads, Amarachi took the items without even thanking him. Lolonjideka also spoke to him in a commanding voice, as if he were a servant. Mama Obina's heart broke as she watched. That night, she lay awake on a mat inside the house. Her mind was full of questions. "This is not the son I raised," she thought. Something was wrong, very wrong. She began remembering stories she had heard many years earlier, stories about spiritual charms and manipulation, stories about people whose minds were controlled by powerful magic. At first, she tried to ignore the thought, but the more she observed her son's behavior, the more the suspicion grew. "My son is not acting like himself," she whispered to herself. "He is under someone's control." The next morning, Mama Obina quietly left the compound. She walked slowly through the village, thinking deeply. Finally, she made a decision. If her son was truly under a spiritual spell, she could not fight such a problem alone. She needed help. She would speak to the elders of the village. She would also seek guidance from spiritual leaders who understood such matters. No matter how difficult the journey might be, she was determined to save her son. A mother's love could not watch silently while her child's life was being destroyed. And so, with determination in her heart, Mama Obina decided to begin searching for the truth and the help that might free her son from whatever darkness had taken hold of him. Story narration. Life in the village of Eziobodo continued moving forward slowly, just as it always had. The red earth roads remained busy with farmers carrying tools, women walking to the stream with clay pots, and traders traveling to nearby markets. But inside the heart of Adise, the memory of what had happened on her wedding day had not fully disappeared. It had been years since the day Obina rejected her during their traditional marriage ceremony. The pain of that moment had once felt like a wound that would never heal. At first, Adise had cried many nights. She had asked herself many questions she could not answer. What did I do wrong? Why did he suddenly change his mind? Why did he look at me like a stranger? But Adise was a strong woman. Slowly, with time, she learned to accept what had happened. She focused again on helping her mother and supporting her younger brother, Kilechi. She returned to the market and continued selling vegetables just like before. Many villagers had shown her kindness after the incident. They had comforted her and reminded her that she had done nothing wrong. Even though the shame of that day had once been painful, Adise refused to allow bitterness to live in her heart. She remained humble and hard-working. Meanwhile, far away in another village, Obina continued living under the strange control of Amarachi and her mother. But Adise knew nothing about the full details of his life now. To her, he was simply a man whose heart had changed in a mysterious way. One bright afternoon, Adise decided to visit a friend who lived in a nearby village. Her friend, Ngozi, had married a man from that village some years earlier. They had remained close friends, and from time to time, Adise visited her. That day, Adise woke early, finished helping her mother in the farm, and prepared for the journey. She wore a simple but neat wrapper and blouse, tied her hair carefully, and carried a small bag containing fruits she planned to give her friend. The journey to Ngozi's village took several hours on foot, but Adise did not mind. She enjoyed walking through the peaceful paths surrounded by trees and farmland. When she arrived at Ngozi's house, her friend welcomed her warmly. "Adise!" Ngozi said happily, rushing forward to hug her. "It has been too long." Adise smiled. "I have missed you too." The two friends spent many hours talking and laughing together. They shared stories about their families, their daily work, and life in their different villages. Ngozi prepared food and they ate together while remembering many happy moments from the past. But as the afternoon began to fade into evening, Adise realized she needed to return home before it became too dark. Ngozi walked with her for part of the journey. The two friends chatted happily as they walked along the narrow village road. Soon, they reached the point where their paths separated. "Be careful on your way home," Ngozi said. "I will," Adise replied. They hugged goodbye and Adise continued walking alone. The sun was beginning to set and the road was becoming quieter as many villagers returned to their homes for the evening. As Adise walked, she suddenly noticed something unusual ahead. Beside the road, under the shade of a large tree, an older woman was sitting on the ground. The woman appeared deeply troubled. Her shoulders shook as she cried softly, covering her face with her hands. Adise slowed her steps. Her kind nature would not allow her to ignore someone in pain. She walked closer and spoke gently. "Mother, are you all right?" The older woman looked up slowly. Her eyes were filled with tears. Adise felt sympathy immediately. "What happened?" Adise asked softly. "Why are you crying here alone?" The woman studied Adise's face carefully. At first, she did not speak. Then suddenly, her expression changed. Her eyes widened with surprise. "You," she whispered. Adise looked confused. "Yes?" The older woman slowly stood up. Her body trembled slightly. "I know you," she said with emotion. Adise frowned slightly. "You know me?" The older woman stepped closer. "Yes," she said with emotion. "I am Obina's mother." Adise felt a sudden wave of shock. For a moment, she could not speak. The name Obina brought back many memories she had tried to leave behind. The older woman looked at her with deep sadness. "My daughter," she said softly. Then suddenly, the woman burst into tears again. This time, her crying was louder and filled with pain. Adise quickly stepped forward to support her. "Mother, please calm down," she said gently. "What is wrong?" The older woman held Adise's hands tightly. "My son's life has been destroyed," she cried. Adise felt confused. "What do you mean?" The woman wiped her tears but continued speaking with deep emotion. "After the day he rejected you during the wedding ceremony, everything changed." Adise listened quietly. "My son never behaved like himself," the older woman continued. "He stopped behaving like himself." She explained how Obina had suddenly become weak and obedient after his marriage. She described how he now lived like a servant in his own home. "He does everything they tell him," she said. "He does not question anything." She shook her head in sorrow. "He does not even visit his family anymore." Adise listened carefully. Her heart began to beat faster. "That is not the Obina I knew," she said quietly. The older woman nodded. "Yes." Tears returned to her eyes. "I believe something evil has been done to him," she lowered her voice. "I believe my son is under a spiritual spell." Adise's mind immediately returned to the moment during the wedding ceremony when Obina suddenly changed. The confusion on his face, the coldness in his voice, the way he had looked at her as if he had never known her before. At that time, she had believed that his heart had simply changed. But now, hearing her mother's story, something began to make sense. Perhaps the strange events on that day had not been natural at all. Adise looked at the older woman with deep concern. "If what you are saying is true," she said slowly, "then something very serious has happened." The older woman nodded. "That is why I have been searching for help." Adise remained silent for a moment as she thought carefully. The pain of the past returned to her heart, but she was not a woman who held on to hatred. If Obina truly had been under a spell, then he too had been a victim. She looked back at her mother kindly. "I think you may be right," she said softly. "The strange events on that wedding ceremony may not have been natural." After the emotional meeting on the roadside, Adise and Mama Obina stood quietly for a moment under the shade of the large tree. The evening sun was slowly sinking behind the distant hills, and the air had begun to cool. Mama Obina wiped the last tears from her face. Her eyes were still red from crying, but something had changed in her heart. For the first time in many months, she felt that someone finally understood her pain. Adise held her hand gently. "Mother," Adise said softly, "you should not cry alone like this." Mama Obina sighed. "My daughter, I have been carrying this worry for too long." She looked at Adise with deep gratitude. "I did not expect that the first person who would truly listen to me would be you." Adise shook her head kindly. "You have every right to seek help for your son." She paused for a moment. "And if he truly changed so suddenly on our wedding day, then something must have caused it." Mama Obina nodded slowly. "I believe someone has done something evil to him," she said quietly. Adise thought carefully. The strange memory of that wedding day returned again. She remembered the exact moment Obina had suddenly looked confused and distant. It had felt unnatural even at that time. Now, hearing his mother's story, the mystery seemed clearer. Adise looked at Mama Obina with determination. "If your son is under a spell," she said, "then we must find someone who can help him." Mama Obina's eyes filled with hope. "You will help me?" she asked. Adise nodded. "Yes." Despite everything that had happened in the past, Adise's heart was not filled with hatred. She believed that if someone was suffering under evil manipulation, they deserved help. From that moment, the two women began their journey to search for the truth. The next morning, Mama Obina stayed in Eziobodo, and together with Adise, they began visiting elders in the village. The first elder they visited was an old man named Mazi Nwanko. He was known for his wisdom and knowledge of village traditions. When they arrived at his compound, he welcomed them respectfully. "What brings both of you here?" he asked. Adise explained the entire situation. She spoke about the strange moment during the wedding ceremony when Obina suddenly changed his mind. Mama Obina then explained how her son's behavior had remained strange for many years after that day. The elder listened carefully. He rubbed his grey beard thoughtfully as they finished speaking. "This matter is serious," he said slowly. "Sometimes, when people behave in ways that cannot be explained, it may be the result of spiritual influence." Adise and Mama Obina looked at each other. "Do you know anyone who can help?" Mama Obina asked. The elder nodded. "There are spiritual healers in nearby villages who may understand this kind of situation." He gave them the names of two traditional healers known for their knowledge of spiritual matters. With hope in their hearts, Adise and Mama Obina began traveling from village to village. Their journey was not easy. Some days they walked long distances under the hot sun. Other days they waited many hours to speak with respected healers who were busy helping other people. The first healer they visited listened to their story carefully. He prepared some herbs and performed small rituals. But after examining the situation, he shook his head. "This matter is deeper than ordinary spiritual problems," he said. "I cannot help with this one." Though disappointed, Adise and Mama Obina did not give up. They traveled to another village to meet a second healer. This man was known for powerful herbal medicine. He listened to their story and performed his own examination. After several hours, he also gave his opinion. "There is definitely spiritual manipulation involved," he said, "but I am not strong enough to break the kind of charm that may have been used." Mama Obina's heart felt heavy. "Then what can we do?" she asked. The healer thought for a moment. "There is one person who may understand this situation," he said finally. He mentioned the name of a respected spiritual elder. His name was Ugochukwu. Ugochukwu is known for deep spiritual wisdom, the healer explained. He does not use harmful magic. He only works to restore truth and balance. Hearing this gave them new hope. The next day, Adise and Mama Obina began the journey to find this spiritual elder. His home was located in a quiet village surrounded by forest and farmland. When they finally arrived, they found a peaceful compound where the elder lived. Unlike the dark shrines of some herbalists, Ugochukwu's compound felt calm and welcoming. Birds sang in the trees nearby, and the air carried the smell of fresh herbs drying in the sun. The elder himself was an older man with a calm face and kind eyes. When they greeted him respectfully, he welcomed them to sit down. "What troubles your hearts?" he asked. Adise carefully explained everything from the beginning. She spoke about the strange moment during the wedding ceremony when Obina suddenly changed his mind. She spoke about his strange behavior during the years of marriage. Ugochukwu listened carefully without interrupting. When they finished, he closed his eyes for a moment as if thinking deeply. Then he spoke slowly. "The situation you describe is not natural." Mama Obina leaned forward. "What do you mean?" The elder looked at her calmly. "Your son has been placed under a charm." Adise felt a small shock run through her body. "A charm?" she asked. "Yes," Ugochukwu replied. "A charm of deception." He explained that certain powerful charms could influence a person's mind. They can cause someone to forget their true feelings. They can also make a person obey others without question. Mama Obina's heart began to beat faster. "Can the charm be broken?" she asked anxiously. The elder nodded slowly. "Yes, but it will require cleansing rituals and spiritual prayers." Adise and Mama Obina felt hope rising again. "Please help us," Mama Obina begged. Ugochukwu agreed. That evening, he began preparing the cleansing rituals. He gathered special herbs and sacred water. He prayed and spoke spiritual words meant to remove the influence of the charm. The rituals continued for several hours. Adise and Mama Obina waited quietly as the elder performed the prayers. Finally, Ugochukwu spoke again. "The spell that has controlled the merchant's mind for years has now been broken." The night after the cleansing rituals was a quiet one, but it did not feel like an ordinary night. The air around Ugochukwu's compound seemed calm and heavy at the same time, as if something important had happened in the spirit world. Adise and Mama Obina remained in the compound, waiting anxiously for what would happen next. The wise elder had told them that the spell had been broken, but he also explained that a man who had lived under such a charm for many years would not return to himself all at once. "He will recover slowly," Ugochukwu had said in his calm voice. "The mind must wake up step by step." Those words remained in their hearts as they waited. Early the next morning, Obina was brought to the compound. He did not fully understand why he had been asked to come there. He only knew that some elders wanted him to meet the spiritual elder. At first, he walked into the compound with the same dull and distant look he had carried for years. His shoulders were slightly bent and his eyes looked tired. The strong confidence he once had as a successful merchant was gone. Mama Obina looked at her son with pain in her heart. This was the child she had raised with so much love. This was the son who had once spoken with strength and wisdom. But now he looked like a man who had been carrying a heavy darkness inside him for a long time. Adise stood quietly by one side of the compound. She did not speak. Her heart was full of many emotions. There was pity, there was pain, there was also fear. She did not know what would happen when Obina's mind became clear again. She did not know whether he would remember the past fully. She did not know whether his memories would bring peace or more sorrow. Ugochukwu came out from inside his hut carrying a small bowl of water mixed with herbs. He asked Obina to sit down on a mat in the center of the compound. Obina obeyed without argument. The elder began speaking soft prayers. Then he dipped a small bunch of leaves into the bowl and sprinkled the water gently over Obina's head and shoulders. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Obina sat there quietly, blinking slowly. Then after some moments, his face changed. He touched his forehead with one hand as if he suddenly felt pain there. Ugochukwu continued the prayers. The compound became very still. Even the birds in the nearby trees seemed quiet. Then Obina shut his eyes tightly. His breathing became uneven. Mama Obina stepped forward in alarm, but Ugochukwu raised one hand for her to stay calm. "Do not be afraid. His mind is waking up." Obina remained still for several moments. Then slowly he opened his eyes. This time, the look in them was different. The dull emptiness that had lived there for years was no longer the same. Confusion filled his face first. Then came shock. He looked around the compound as if he was seeing it properly for the first time. His eyes moved to his mother. "Mother," he said softly. Mama Obina froze. That voice sounded different. It sounded real. It sounded like the son she remembered. Tears filled her eyes immediately. "My son," she whispered. Then Obina turned his eyes toward Adise. The moment he saw her, his face changed again. It was as if a hidden door inside his mind had suddenly opened. He stared at her for a long moment without speaking. Then he lowered his head into his hands. Something was happening inside him. Memories were returning. Not in one straight line, but like pieces of a broken mirror coming together one by one. He remembered the road into Eziobodo. He heard people speak about a quiet and kind young woman. He remembered seeing Adise in the market, standing beside her mother and arranging vegetables. He remembered the peace he felt in his heart when he first spoke to her family. He remembered coming with elders to ask for her hand in marriage. Then the memory shifted. He saw the wedding day, the music, the crowd, the joy, then confusion, a strange heaviness in his head, a sudden pull in his thoughts, a face, Amarachi, then darkness, then cold words leaving his mouth, words he now hated remembering. I cannot marry Adise. As the memory returned, Obina trembled. He removed his hands from his face and looked up, his eyes already wet with tears. No, he whispered. Mama Obina covered her mouth and began crying softly. Obina shook his head like a man who had just woken from a terrible dream. I remember, he said weakly. Ugochukwu watched him calmly. What do you remember? The elder asked. Obina swallowed hard. I remember loving Adise. I remember going to her house with honor. His voice broke. And I remember rejecting her. The shame in his face was deep. He pressed his hands against his chest as if the pain there was too much. How did this happen? He asked in a trembling voice. Ugochukwu answered gently. You were placed under a powerful charm of deception. Your mind was no longer free. Obina looked down at the ground. For several moments he could not speak. Then he whispered, so it was true. Something was wrong with me. Mama Obina rushed toward him and knelt beside him. Yes, my son, she said through tears. Obina looked at his mother, then at Adise again. The pain in his face became even deeper. He saw her not only as she stood now, but also as she had stood on that wedding day, dressed as a bride, holding a cup of palm wine, full of shy hope. And he remembered how he had destroyed that moment in front of the whole village. Even if he had been under a spell, the pain he caused was real. He could not escape that truth. Slowly, he stood up. Then, to everyone's surprise, he walked toward Adise and fell to his knees before her. Adise stepped back in shock. Obina lowered his head. I do not deserve your forgiveness. His voice was heavy with shame. I have remembered everything. I know now that my mind was not my own, but I also know that I wounded you deeply. He lifted his face and tears were running down his cheeks. I shamed you before the whole village. I brought sorrow to your mother. I brought anger to your brother. I destroyed peace with my own hands. Adise's throat tightened. She had imagined many times what she might say to Obina if she ever saw him again in his right mind. But now that the moment had come, words were not easy. She looked at him quietly. There was no pride in him anymore, no confusion, only sorrow. Ugochukwu rose slowly from where he sat. The truth that was hidden is beginning to come into the light, he said. He turned to Mama Obina and Adise. This matter is too great to remain secret. The wrong was done publicly, and the truth must also be made public. Mama Obina nodded. Yes, the whole village must know what truly happened. Adise remained silent for a moment, then nodded too. She understood. The shame she suffered happened in front of everyone in Iziobodo. The strange marriage also had been accepted by the people because no one knew the truth. If justice was to come, it had to be seen by all. Ugochukwu then sent word to some respected elders. Soon, elders from Obina's village and elders from Iziobodo began to discuss the matter together. When they heard what Ugochukwu had confirmed, they agreed that silence would only protect evil. The truth had to be brought out fully. And so a decision was made. A public meeting would be held in the Iziobodo market square. It would not happen inside one family compound. It would happen in the open, before elders, women, youths, and all who had witnessed the shameful events years earlier. Messengers were sent to both villages. The announcement spread quickly. Let everyone gather at the Iziobodo market square. A serious family matter will be addressed by the elders. Truth must be spoken before the people. As the news spread, many villagers became curious. Some remembered the strange wedding day very clearly, others had only heard the story in pieces. But now, everyone understood that something important was about to be revealed. Meanwhile, Obina remained deeply troubled. His mind was now clear, but clarity brought pain with it. Every memory that returned cut him deeply. He thought about the years he had lost. He thought about the business he had neglected. He thought about how he had abandoned his own mother and siblings. He thought about Adise, the woman he truly loved, and how he had watched her suffer because of words he never should have spoken. Shame filled his heart like a heavy stone. But there was now one thing stronger than confusion: truth. And for the first time in many years, Obina wanted that truth to be known, no matter how painful it would be. The day of the public meeting arrived, and the atmosphere in the village of Eziobodo felt very different from an ordinary market day. Instead of the usual busy trading and loud bargaining between buyers and sellers, the market square was filled with people who had gathered to witness something serious. Word had spread quickly through the village and even to nearby communities. The elders had called for a public gathering, and everyone knew that it had something to do with this strange marriage that had shocked the village years earlier. Men, women, and young people gathered under the wide shade of the large udala tree at the center of the market square. The elders sat on wooden stools arranged in a circle, while the villagers stood around them, forming a large crowd. People whispered quietly among themselves as they waited. "Today we will finally know the truth," one woman said. "Yes," another replied. "That wedding day was one of the strangest things I have ever seen." Some villagers remembered the moment clearly. They remembered the music that suddenly stopped. They remembered the bride standing frozen with the cup of palm wine. They remembered the merchant's shocking words, "I cannot marry Adise." Those words had remained in the memory of many people. Now, everyone wanted to understand what had truly happened. Soon, the people involved in the matter began arriving at the market square. Adise arrived with her mother, Nneka, and her younger brother, Kelechi. They walked quietly and sat together near the elders. Adise looked calm, but inside her heart there were many emotions. The past was about to be opened again in front of the entire village. Not long after, Obina arrived with his mother and some elders from his hometown. His face looked serious and humble. The confident merchant that people once knew had changed. The years under the charm had humbled him deeply. When villagers saw him, some whispered softly, "That is the man. He looks different now." Yes, he does. Then Amarachi arrived. She walked slowly into the market square with her head lowered. Behind her came her mother, Lolo Njideka. The proud woman who once walked confidently through the village now looked tense and uneasy. She could already feel the eyes of many villagers watching her. The elders waited until everyone had gathered before the meeting began. One of the oldest elders, a respected man named Mazi Okoye, stood up slowly. He cleared his throat and raised his hand to quiet the crowd. "My people," he began. The murmuring voices slowly faded. "We are gathered here today to bring truth into the light." He looked around the crowd. Years ago, during a traditional marriage ceremony in this village, something happened that brought confusion and shame to two families. Many people nodded quietly. "That matter was never fully understood," the elder continued. "But today, new information has come forward." He turned toward Obina. "This young man has recently regained clarity of mind after many years of strange behavior." The villagers listened closely. The spiritual elder Ugochukwu has confirmed that a powerful charm of deception was placed upon him during that marriage ceremony. A wave of surprise moved through the crowd. People began whispering again. "A charm? So it was not natural?" The elder raised his hand again for silence. "Because this matter involves serious wrongdoing, the truth must now be spoken openly." He looked toward Amarachi and her mother. "You both must speak before the elders and the people." Amarachi's hands began to shake. For many years, she had carried the secret of what truly happened on that wedding day. Now, there was no place to hide. The elders looked at her firmly. "Speak the truth," one elder said. "At this gathering, lies will only bring greater shame." For several moments, Amarachi remained silent. Tears slowly filled her eyes. Then suddenly, she broke down crying. The sound of her crying echoed across the market square. "I am sorry," she cried. The villagers watched with shock. The elders waited patiently. Through her tears, Amarachi began to speak. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling. "It is true." Everyone leaned forward to listen. "I saw Obina before anyone else," she said. She explained how she had met him on the road the day he first arrived in the village. I liked him immediately, she admitted. I believed he should become my husband. Her crying became louder. But when I later discovered that he wanted to marry Adise, I became very jealous. She looked toward her cousin. I believed she did not deserve him. Gasps spread through the crowd. Amarachi wiped her face with trembling hands and continued. I complained to my mother, she said. I told her that Adise should not marry such a wealthy man. Then she spoke the darkest part of the story. My mother went secretly to a herbalist. The crowd reacted loudly. The elders quickly raised their hands to restore order. What herbalist? One elder asked. Amarachi sniffed and answered. A powerful herbalist named Iziani. She explained how her mother had traveled secretly to another village to collect a charm. The entire market square listened in stunned silence. My mother used the charm during the wedding ceremony, she continued. She waited for the moment when Obina lifted his eyes. Her voice became softer. When he looked at me, the charm changed his mind. The shock in the crowd became even greater. Some women covered their mouths with their hands. Men shook their heads in disbelief. So it was witchcraft, someone whispered. Amarachi lowered her head in shame. Yes, she said quietly. I allowed my jealousy to destroy my cousin's happiness. Her confession filled the air with heavy silence. Then the elders turned their eyes toward Lolonjideka. The proud woman now looked different. Her shoulders were no longer straight. Her face looked tired and troubled. Do you deny what your daughter has said? An elder asked. For a moment, Lolonjideka remained silent, but the weight of the truth was too heavy. Finally, she spoke. It is true, she admitted. A deep murmur spread through the crowd. She confessed everything. She explained how jealousy had pushed her to seek help from the herbalist. She described the charm she had used during the wedding ceremony. Her voice trembled as she finished speaking. All I wanted was for my daughter to have a wealthy husband, she said weakly. The elders listened without speaking. When she finished, the leader of the elders stood up again. This act is a great wrongdoing, he said firmly. You use dark manipulation to destroy an honorable marriage. He looked around the crowd. You brought shame to this village. Then he made the decision of the elders clear. The marriage between Obina and Amarachi is declared invalid. A wave of reaction moved through the crowd. The elder continued speaking. Because this marriage involves deception and witchcraft, it cannot stand under the law of our people. Then he looked directly at Lolo Njideka. All the money, goats, drinks, and gifts that were taken from Obina through deception must be returned. The crowd nodded in agreement. Justice had finally begun to speak. The elders declared the marriage invalid and demanded that all the money taken from the merchant be returned. After the public meeting at the Eziobodo Market Square, the village slowly began to return to its normal, peaceful life. The shocking confessions made that day remained in the minds of many people, but the truth had finally come into the open. For many years, confusion and rumors had surrounded the strange wedding that turned into chaos. Now, everyone finally understood what had truly happened. The elders had spoken with authority. Justice had been delivered, and the marriage that was built on deception had been declared invalid. Although the truth had brought some sadness, it also brought relief. Adise's name was finally cleared in the eyes of the entire village. The shame she had carried for years was lifted from her shoulders. Many women in the market greeted her warmly again. My daughter, you are always innocent, some of them said. The truth has finally spoken. Adise accepted their kindness with humility. She had never wanted revenge. She only wanted peace. Meanwhile, the lives of the people involved in this story slowly began to change. For Obina, the road ahead was not easy. After the spell had been broken, he began to understand the full damage that had happened during the years when his mind was not his own. His once successful trading business had suffered greatly. Many of his trading partners had stopped working with him. Some of his goods had been lost and debts had piled up over time. At first, Obina felt deeply ashamed. He often sat quietly remembering the mistakes that happened during those years. But his mother encouraged him not to give up. "My son," Mama Obina said one evening, "what happened to you was not your fault." She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "But now that your mind is free, you must stand up again and rebuild your life." Those words gave him strength. Slowly, Obina began working again. He returned to the trading routes he once traveled. He visited farmers in different villages and began buying palm produce again. At first, some people were uncertain about working with him. But as time passed, they saw that the old Obina had returned. He was once again careful in business and respectful in his dealings with others. Little by little, his business began to recover. But there was still one matter that remained heavy in his heart: Adise. Even though the charm had controlled his mind on that terrible day, he could not forget the pain he had caused her. He remembered clearly the moment she stood before him holding the cup of palm wine. He remembered the confusion in her eyes when he rejected her. That memory filled him with deep regret. "I must apologize properly," he told his mother one day. Mama Obina nodded. "Yes," she said, "that is the right thing to do." In Igbo tradition, when someone causes great harm or shame to another family, it is important to seek forgiveness with humility and respect. Obina knew he could not simply go alone. So, he spoke with the elders of his family. Together, they agreed that he would visit Adise's compound with elders, carrying drinks and kola nuts as a sign of apology. One bright morning, the group prepared for the journey. Obina dressed simply but neatly. His mother walked beside him, and several respected elders from his family joined them. They carried bottles of palm wine, kola nuts, and other traditional items used for seeking forgiveness. The journey to Adise's compound felt long and quiet. Obina's heart beat nervously. He did not know how Adise and her family would receive him. When they finally arrived, Adise's mother, Neka, was sitting outside sorting vegetables. She looked up in surprise when she saw the visitors approaching. "Welcome," she said politely, though her face showed curiosity. The elders greeted her respectfully. Soon, Adise came outside as well. When she saw Obina standing among the visitors, her heart skipped for a moment. Many memories rushed back into her mind, but she remained calm. Everyone sat down quietly. One of the elders from Obina's family cleared his throat and began speaking. "We have come here today for an important reason," he said respectfully. He explained that Obina had regained his senses after the charm that controlled him. He spoke about the truth that had been revealed during the public meeting. Then, he turned toward Obina. "My son, speak to them." Obina stood up slowly. His voice trembled slightly as he began to speak. "Mama Neka," he addressed Adise's mother respectfully, "I have come here today with great shame in my heart." He lowered his head. "What happened on the day of our wedding ceremony caused great pain to your family." He took a deep breath. "Even though my mind was under a spell, the pain it caused you was real." He turned toward Adise. His eyes were filled with sincerity. "Adise," he said softly, "I cannot change the past, but I ask for your forgiveness." He knelt down on the ground as a sign of deep humility. "I am truly sorry." The compound became quiet. Ineka looked at the young man kneeling before them. She could see the honesty in his face. She also remembered the years of hardship her family had endured after that painful day. But she also knew that holding bitterness forever would only bring more pain. She looked at her daughter. "Adise," she said gently, "what do you see?" Adise remained silent for a moment. She looked at Obina carefully. She remembered the man who had once come to her house with respect and good intentions. She also remembered the strange moment when everything suddenly went wrong. Now she understood that the situation had not been natural. Slowly, her heart softened. She stepped forward. "You may stand up," she said quietly. Obina lifted his head slowly. Adise looked at him calmly. "I forgive you," she said. A deep sense of relief filled the compound. The elders nodded with satisfaction. Peace had finally been restored between the families. After that meeting, the elders began discussing something important. Since the marriage between Obina and Amarachi had been declared invalid, and since Obina's original intention was to marry Adise, they suggested that the two families could begin new marriage preparations. This time, everything would be done properly. No charms, no jealousy. Only truth and honest intentions. Both families agreed. Soon, preparations for a new traditional marriage ceremony began. When the day finally arrived, the entire village gathered once again in Adise's compound. But this time, the atmosphere was different. There was no confusion. There was no hidden darkness. The music was joyful, the dancing was full of happiness, and the smiles on people's faces were genuine. Adise walked proudly through the crowd carrying the cup of palm wine. When she reached Obina, she knelt before him and offered him the drink. Obina accepted it with a grateful smile. The crowd cheered loudly. This time, the celebration was filled with true joy, honest love, and blessings from the entire village. From that day forward, the story of jealousy, betrayal, and truth became a lesson often told by elders in Eziobodo. Whenever young people gathered to hear stories, the elders would remind them of the events that once shook the village, and they always ended the story with the same lesson. Jealousy may cause darkness for a time, but truth will always find a way to restore what was lost. The lesson of the story is that jealousy, greed, and deception may seem to succeed for a short time, but the truth will always come to light, justice will eventually be served, and in the end, honesty, patience, and a good heart will restore what was wrongly taken. Thanks for watching this amazing story on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.